Hello and welcome back to the Rate Show with Sahan and Jerzen, and this is a show where we discuss tools, techniques and systems in the world of productivity and decide whether they are overrated, underrated or somewhere in between. Tell me, Jerzen, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing quite good, Sahan. Nothing really has changed from last week. I'm still on a little sabbatical, aka summer vacation, from medical school, but I'm also on a sabbatical from just content creation in general. I haven't been uploading videos for the past month or so, due to several reasons, because I'm working on some other projects, but I will certainly get back into it. But yeah, I do have a video in the pipeline. It's just a little Q&A to let everyone know what I've been up to, why I haven't been uploading videos so constantly, because I really did fall off. I uploaded videos quite constantly in the beginning, but then I fell off, and I feel like the people deserve an explanation. How has your week been?
Yeah, dude, the people they deserve to know the truth. Yeah, truth about Jerzen's disappearance. My week has been good. As people can probably tell from the way I'm speaking, maybe or maybe not, I got braces this week for the first time in my life at the ripe old age of 24, and it's been an experience. I'm currently on a very liquidy diet, I would say, not liquid, and yeah, it's been difficult. In other news, my TikTok meme page hit 10k followers, which is big news. I'm super happy about that.
Congratulations.
And so yeah, overall it's been a pretty good week. Cheers,
That's
man. Yeah.
Great. Congratulations on the 10k. I think we spoke about this before, but 10k followers on TikTok is sort of equivalent to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, you said? So that's a pretty good metric. That's a pretty good milestone. And about the braces, I wouldn't say it's too evident. I didn't notice anything different until you actually told me that you got braces. So on that front, don't really worry about stuff. So what are we talking about this week, Sahan?
So today we are talking about habits. Yeah. Big topic, I think, in the world of productivity. So it should be a good episode.
Mm-hmm. Habits are like my thing, my jam, I would say. If there's one thing that I can only talk about for the rest of my life, I would say it's habits. And the thing that actually got me into habits is actually one of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about three things specifically: Atomic Habits, the book by James Clear; habit tracking, which is a method for building better habits; and finally we're going to be talking about accountability, which is it's one of my personal favorite things. I've spoken about this several times before on videos, on newsletters, on my weekly newsletter. Subscribe to it if you haven't. And all right, so Atomic Habits by James Clear. I would say this is one of my favorite books, and I read it last year, and even now, I think I read it a year ago. Yes, a year ago, and even now, it's one of the best books that I have read. A, because it's just one of the easiest books that I have read in my entire life. There wasn't a lot of jargon that you need to understand, and it was pretty captivating. Atomic Habits basically speaks about 4 stages of habits, aka the habit loop, and then you have 4 laws of building habits. So let's break those down. So the first thing is the 4 stages of habits, aka the habit loop, which is cue, craving, response, and reward. Or I like to call it, or I like to abbreviate it as CCRR. Do you want to talk about this? Do you want to explain what this is, Sahan?
Yeah, so it's been about a year since I've read Atomic Habits, so this is a nice little test. So cue, I think, is something that triggers the habit. For example, let's say, I don't know, I see it's sunny, I decide to go for a run. I wouldn't say that's a good cue, but it is a cue. It's something that triggers the habit. The craving is what you experience when you respond to the cue. For example, if I open the fridge, I could, if I'm used to eating sugary foods, I can get the craving for the sugary foods if that's something I've done repeatedly. The response is what you do, you eat the sugary food, and the reward is you feel better, the sugar satisfies you. And so I think those are the 4 stages here: cue, craving, response, reward. And then, so after this habit loop, like you said, you have the 4 laws, which are, this is more about creating or destroying habits. So you have make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And how about you talk about those, Jerzen? Talk to me about the 4 laws.
All right, for sure. So, like you said, the 4 laws of habit change are: 1, make it obvious. This basically means that you shouldn't hide your habit or the cue for your habit, like you mentioned, behind some sort of metaphorical curtain. It should be something that's very evident and in front of you so you can make your habit an easy part of your life. It can just be an easy segue from what you're currently doing. And and I think this is pretty powerful. Like a good example for this is for me to get into working out the first thing in the morning, I started putting my workout clothes on my dresser. So as soon as I wake up, right next to my bottle of water, I see it right there. So I think to myself, oh, I should probably go work out now. The next law of habit change is make it attractive. This is pretty obvious. You wouldn't want to do something that doesn't seem attractive. By attractive, it doesn't mean necessarily physical liking, but make it attractive as in make it rewardful. Make it do something that's going to give you the reward that you want right then and there. Third, make it easy. So I always say this, if you want to do something, make it as frictionless as possible, because the more friction that you add in, the more likely you are to not do that particular task. Finally, make it satisfying. Who wouldn't want to do something that's not satisfying? You should always try to make the habit that you are trying to do satisfying in the current moment, because this is something that always messes me up. If you think about it, I think this was also spoken about in Atomic Habits. Good habits tend to be bad. Good habits tend to feel good in the long run, but feel bad in the short run. And bad habits are the exact opposite. They feel good in the short run, and they're probably really bad for you in the long run. A good example for this is exercise versus smoking. When you exercise, when you work out, you feel out of breath. Your heart rate's up, you're sweating all over, you look like a mess. But in the long run, it's definitely good for you. Exercise has proven to be one of the best things that you can do to prolong your life. Take smoking, for example. The nicotine rush that you get right when you smoke, a lot of people crave that. A lot of people think of that as satisfying. But in the long run, you have various lung diseases, lung cancer, that's going to be in your life if you continue smoking. Another thing that I want to touch on is these 4 laws of habit change. If you convert them into their antonyms or their opposites, it's a way to make a habit less desiring to do. I think this is also touched on in Atomic Habits. So
yeah, it is.
If you can make it not obvious, unattractive, make it difficult, and just make it not satisfying, you can then make a habit that you're currently doing into a habit that you don't do anymore. So what do you think of the 4 laws? Would you add anything, or do you think this is perfect as is?
I think this book is one of the few books where there, in the productivity space, where there is such a good signal to noise ratio. And what I mean by that is it's very information dense in a way that a lot of books are what we call like a big idea book, in that that book contains one big idea and the rest of it's sort of filler. It's stories about that idea or different riffs. Whereas with Atomic Habits, it's so dense. Even though you have these 4, I say dense, I mean intellectually dense rather than in terms of reading. It's very easy to read. But, dude, it's incredible how with just these 2 things, the habit loop and the 4 laws,
it's the entire book.
All of the habits are explained, yeah. Which is why I think it's, even though this book is like a bestseller, it's hugely underrated in that everyone should read it, I think. Anyone who wants to change their habits or is interested in habits has to read it.
For sure, yes. Another thing that I want to touch on is, I feel like this is my favorite part of the book. It's when James Clear, the author, said that there's no such thing as good habits and bad habits, but rather it's effective habits and non-effective habits. And I didn't have to go through my notes to remember this. I read the book a year ago. I still remember it because I keep talking about it to people. Every habit that you do has a purpose. For example, let's go back to the exercising and smoking example. After a long day of work, right? You come home and you want to relax. Some people work out to relax, and that has better long-term gains. It's an effective habit, and it gives you that short-term benefit of relieving your stress. At least it does for me. I work out to relieve some stress sometimes. It gives me some alone time. It gives me some time to, I don't know. I sort of think of it as a mindfulness practice, but I feel like that's a conversation for a different time. Let's talk about smoking. That's a non-effective habit. You shouldn't necessarily call it a good habit and a bad habit. It does what it needs to do. It relieves your stress in the moment, but it's non-effective because in the long term, it's not really good for you. And thinking of habits like this has really helped me cut down on bad habits, bad in air quotes for whoever's listening to this on audio. And yeah, I feel like this is my favorite takeaway from the book. And I would wholeheartedly agree with you that this is definitely an underrated book. It's popular. Everyone knows about it. Everyone's talking about it. But a lot of people don't really give it a chance because, well, it's talking about so much. But I feel like this is an underrated book. Right. One of the things that Atomic Habits portrays and talks about is habit tracking. Now, habit tracking is basically when you, well, like the name suggests, is when you track your habits. And I think this has a lot of benefits and a lot of gains, particularly for habits that you don't necessarily want to do. And again, I keep coming back to this example because it's so relevant to my life right now, but exercising. When I started exercising, I started to track how I was exercising. And I started to track when all I managed to get a workout done. And I feel like this touches on the third point, but this is a form of self-accountability. You're giving yourself proof that you either did the habit or you didn't do the habit. And that causes some, I would say, feelings towards yourself that, oh, I didn't do the habit. Maybe that's not good enough. And then you would do the habit. What do you think about habit tracking?
Yeah, so I think habit tracking comes in many forms. And I think that it can be very simple or very in-depth. So, for example, in the most basic form, you could just take a calendar and let's say you have a habit you want to do every day, like exercise, just do an X and every day on the calendar. And that would be habit tracking. Or you could like write down every single exercise you do, how many reps you've done, how many sets, the intensity of each set, like your, And so it comes in many different forms. And I think the power of habit tracking is making you realize like once you track stuff, you realize that you lie to yourself a lot, not on purpose, or that you don't really understand. Like, for example, you're talking about exercise. Let's talk about food. Like when people track the calories they eat, everyone is surprised because it's one of those things that you assume you know what's going in and out of your body, but as soon as you start tracking it, it helps you to understand your behavior. And the power of understanding your behavior is then you can set realistic goals. Because if you're someone who's eating 2,000 calories of your maintenance a day, it's probably not realistic to say you want to lose a kilo or 2 pounds a week. So I think it's really useful understanding where you're at, because without understanding where you're at, you can't change. And then building on from that, as you change, you can measure your progress, realistically when you're tracking. And the tracking itself maintains motivation. So I think on the whole, it is a massive, massive win. I think tracking is definitely something people who are interested in habits should be doing.
For sure. I think habit tracking is one of the, I would say, pillars of building new and better habits. This is sort of a tangent, but have you ever gone through the phase of tracking your own calories and what's going in and stuff? Have you ever done that?
Yeah, I remember when I first went to fitness when I was about 20, I think, I started tracking calories. And it was the world of food is a whole nother discussion, but once you start realizing because for those who don't know, basic calorie tracking revolves around tracking the amount of fat, carbohydrates, and protein you're intaking, and your macros essentially, yeah. And it is, once you start to realize how macros are distributed, they're so different to what you would have thought. Like, for example, let's say you have a meat that you put in the oven, usually like a breaded chicken, that'll have a lot of fat. Like that had a lot more fat than I thought. So yeah, I think for me, when I think of tracking, I always think of tracking my calories, because that was when I really realized like how much tracking forces you to educate yourself and to reevaluate what you're doing in terms of your habits. Yeah. What about you? What's something you track on a weekly basis or daily basis?
On a weekly, I would say on a daily basis, I track working out. And now because it's summer and I'm in Dubai because it's hot outside, I track if I'm going outside, because I have a tendency to stay inside way more often now just because it's hot outside. So I try to get a walk down at the lake nearby. And I also try to get working out done every single day, or maybe at least 3 to 4 times a week. I feel like that's something that I've been falling back on for the past 2 weeks. So I actually started to, so everyone in the video, you can see that I actually started to track working out and stuff right now. And it's a simple habit tracker. I just, on my daily journal, wherever I write my to-do list, I just put a little W for workout, O for outside, and cross it out if I've done it. And it's pretty simple. It's effective. And I feel like that's what's important. Building effective habit tracking solutions. And to touch on what you just said about tracking your calories and your macros, I never realized how bad sugar is for you until I actually started tracking my calories and my intake. And every time I just put in a teaspoon of sugar into my coffee or into my tea or something like that, it was just bonkers. I realized how bad it is for you. And that also caused me to completely cut out sugar last year. So last January, I decided to completely cut out sugar, added sugar. I still have fruits and, chocolates and stuff in regulation, of course, but I don't add sugar into my coffee anymore. And that's been great. I realized that it's not that good for you. And I saw a lot of changes after that. And that's the only reason I'm mentioning this right now. I'm not saying cut out sugar for everyone, but I personally have seen some changes, and I think it's pretty great. So, overall, habit tracking, under or overrated?
I would say definitely underrated. I think the only case where habit tracking goes awry is when people aren't careful about what they're measuring. So, for example, let's say for many of us, the habits we want to build are to gain skills that are quite, I don't know how to say, expansive. So let's say you want to have the habit of learning a language. You could say, I want to watch 30 minutes of Spanish TV a day. Let's say you want to learn Spanish. But you have to be careful, because if you focus on the measurement, you end up watching a lot of Spanish TV, but you don't learn the grammar, don't learn the vocab, you're not speaking to people. And overall, hugely underrated. You just need to be careful of what you're measuring, because there's a law. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. I think, yeah. So that's the only thing I'd be careful of.
Wasn't that by, I don't know if it was by this person, but I think I've heard it from Tiago Forte. Didn't he tweet it?
Yeah. He's definitely tweeted it before, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So I would agree with you. It's a highly underrated thing, habit tracking. But I would mildly disagree with the fact that it depends on what you're tracking. Yes, that's true. But I feel like it's highly subjective as well. If you're in a state where you're not well, physically or mentally, doing the bare minimum usually helps. For example, if you're just starting out on your weight loss journey and you're trying to make going to the gym a habit for you, something that really helps is showing up and going to the gym. Even if you don't do much, even if you just work out for 15 to 20 minutes, just showing up, even if you don't feel like it, could help you reinforce that habit. So I feel like that's an important point to touch on. Yes, I agree with what you said. It's underrated and you should track the right things, but it depends on your situation. If you're just starting out, sometimes the bare minimum is what you need to do to gain traction and build up on the graph of building habits. So yeah, underrated. I feel like a lot of things today are just going to be underrated because just habits.
Yeah, no, dude, I think so.
Exactly. Habits are wonderful. Love habits. Right. What are we talking about next? Accountability. Right.
Yeah, we're talking about accountability, yeah.
I love accountability. I'm a huge advocate for accountability. I've spoken about this on videos, on my newsletter, I think maybe twice or thrice. And I think accountability, for me as a student, is highly, highly underrated. There have been several times, right? Several times where I open up my book, I open up my lecture to start studying, but I really don't feel like doing it. Just the change of environment that accountability brings up. Okay, let's talk about what accountability is first. Accountability, my definition of accountability is that you involve other people or other things into the habit that you're currently building. And that way, you're held accountable to that person. A good example for this is with my friend. She wanted to get into working out, and I was already working out. We do this thing called an accountability check-in every week, every Saturday morning, where we would just hop on a call. A, it's a good way to just keep in touch and keep up with a friend. But B, we also ensure that the two of us have been mildly active during the entire week. And you can involve, wagers into this. So I think it was Ali and Taimur. They had a little bit of a money wager, which they would give money to each other if they didn't follow up on some habit. But yeah, for that reason, I think accountability is quite quite powerful, because when you involve another person into this entire habit building process, you just want to not disappoint them, so you would definitely do the habit. What are your thoughts about accountability?
Yeah, I think accountability is probably the easiest way to make a habit solidify, to achieve a goal. And I think a lot of people associate accountability with another person, and I think that probably is the best way. But I think there are a lot of services now that will hold you accountable. Like, even in my own life, I'm currently using a website called BeMinder, and the premise is you choose a goal. It can be any sort of goal. Like, for me personally, it's weight loss. And if I every day I have to like put in my weight, and if over a long enough period of time, if I'm not losing weight, it takes money from me. Like, and every time I fail, it doubles. So it's $5, $10, $30, and this isn't forever. So there's a date that the goal ends. So I think it's like early September, and like I just have to keep. There's a goal weight I want to reach, and if I don't hit it by then, it'll take my money. And in a funny way, there's another service called Stick, and they do something very similar, except they take money and they give it to charities, but you have to choose a charity you don't like. So let's say you're a Democrat, you choose to give money to the Republicans, or let's say you own a gun, they give it to like people who lobby against gun control in the US. So major hack, definitely helps. And don't be worried if you don't know anyone who can keep you accountable, because there are services, online apps that can make you accountable. Yeah, big fan.
I also think that even if you don't have a person, and even if you're not using an application, one form of accountability that I often practice is just going somewhere where other people are also working. For example, co-working spaces. So I'm pretty sure you have those in London where you are. And here in Dubai, we actually have this app. It's called Let's Work. It's pretty great because it shows you all these hotel lobbies and cafes and whatnot that are within their system. And if you have a Let's Work membership, you can go to these cafes and stuff, and you can get free coffee, free unlimited water and tea, free parking. So it's pretty great. You just have to pay that monthly fee. And that's my go-to form of accountability, because right now with the whole online class thing, my friends and I are in various time zones, and it's not that easy to find someone that's in the same time zone as you. And this has been a great way for me to be accountable. Now, I know it's still COVID and stuff, so you're not supposed to go out and whatnot, but once things are starting to open up, you should definitely look into co-working spaces if you haven't, and even just a coffee shop. Coffee shops are great for accountability, especially if it's one where there's a lot of students or a lot of people working on their laptops. Just seeing them work makes you think that, oh, maybe I should get some work done as well. And then you get some work done. So, final bottom line, underrated or overrated accountability?
I would say underrated. I think you need to be careful, because I don't think you can always have someone else to hold you accountable for stuff. But I think in most cases, accountability is the easiest way to ensure you either break a habit or to get rid of procrastination. Because I think essentially procrastination is just waiting till a time when you yourself feel accountable. Like, maybe you don't feel accountable for that essay 4 weeks before the deadline, but the night before, you know that you have an essay to hand in. So overall, massively underrated. I'm a big fan. Yeah.
Highly agree with that. I think accountability is definitely underrated, because if you don't feel like doing anything, it's like a life hack. If you don't feel like doing anything, involve some other person into it, involve an application, and boom, you actually feel like doing it once. And that is it for this week's Habits. Great.
Let's talk about our underrated things for this week. So, Jerzen, my underrated thing for this week is houseplants. Now, I was never someone who was on the houseplant vibe. Like, at university, there was a very specific type of person who would be like, this is my life, I own houseplants. My living room is full of houseplants, my kitchen's full of houseplants, my bedroom's full of houseplants. But recently, after moving back home from Spain, I got to decide how I wanted to redo my room. And I sort of went for this wood and houseplant aesthetic. And there is something about having these plants that you look after, you water every day or every other day, or, yeah. And I don't know, I just love the vibe of houseplants. And yeah, I think there's something about loving the space you're in that just helps you do more work in that space or feel happier in that space. So yeah, I'd recommend houseplants to anyone who is on the fence.
What are your thoughts about fake plants versus real plants?
I'm definitely pro real plants, but saying that I actually have a fake plant on my desk right now. So that's how I got into it, you know? I think you start with the fake ones and then move your way up. If you feel that you're not ready to be accountable for your watering, after you listen to this episode, you should be. But if you're not, buy a fake plant and then graduate to the real plants, if you will, later on. What is your underrated thing for this week?
For me, it's journaling. Right, so I've been in a productivity slump for the past, I don't know, month or so. And I really haven't been doing much. And I wanted to get back into I wouldn't say the grind of doing stuff, but just that comfortable area where you're doing stuff, but you're not really overwhelmed. And I got back into a habit which I stopped doing last year, and that's journaling. And this isn't necessarily a journal where I write my feelings and stuff. That's a separate thing. But this is more of a bullet journal kind of thing, but not exactly a bullet journal. So you have those bullet journals where people draw all these beautiful designs and they make it look so aesthetic and they plan ahead into the future. I can't do any of that because I'm a perfectionist and I hate doing that. But what I do instead, I can actually show this for the video. I would write down all the days right here, so you can also see it as well. So I would write down Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And every morning, I would just write out a little to-do list. And I have this, I think I got this from some YouTube video. I don't remember exactly which YouTube video it was, but I will basically write out my tasks with bullet points. And these bullet points allow me to either do the task today, push it to tomorrow, and I can also, so basically, everything starts out as a bullet point. My daily highlight, which is one thing that I want to do today, which I have to get done today, will be a circle. If I get it done, I will cross it out with a little X, and if I want to move it to the next day, I would just make it a little arrow. And this is also where I include my little habit tracker that I mentioned with the little W for working out and O for going outside. And it's a very simple and compact system, and I actually went out and got this really pretty book. It's completely plain white. I love me a good aesthetic minimal design. And yeah, I feel like this is highly underrated because this actually makes you do stuff. And you don't necessarily have to go out and buy a book to do this. You can do it on a whiteboard. You can do it on a sticky note. I did it on a sticky note for quite a bit, and I just stuck it on my computer. But I found out that I wasn't at my desk a lot anymore because I wasn't studying. So I just thought that having a book would be a better idea. And I think it's better to keep it physical over digital. I feel like I need to touch on this because I tried going digital, but I think the problem with it being digital is that it's behind a layer of technology and you can easily ignore it. You can easily not open your phone. You can easily not open the, I don't know, to-do list application or reminders app or whatever you use. So keeping it physical, keeping a journal to get back on track is definitely a good way to do stuff. And that's that. Right, so let's wrap up this episode. Great. See you next week then. Goodbye.
See you next week, guys. Thank you.